Is a fight for freedom, old top.
I'll do it. For America.
No details on the cost.
And joining us right now, Mom, Sarah Palin, former governor of the great state of Alaska. The key here is you should, if you're playing in sand, just wash your hands. Come on.
Isn't that the key? We could have saved him a whole lot of money. Just
right here.
Asking Gretchen. She
there you
told
go.
him.
Well, welcome to the couch. It's been too long.
Thank you.
What is it like for the first time? Because I don't remember my first time on the couch. Do you guys?
Quite curvy. Quite
curvy.
That's why we call it that.
You advertise.
You can tell the truth.
It's nice. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here.
Let's talk a little bit about politics, because also on the curvy couch early this morning was Governor Mitt Romney, and you earlier, I think it was on Sunday, had said that maybe he wasn't conservative enough for you. We got him to respond to that. Let's see what he said.
I'm not quite sure what she'd be referring to. I'm pro-life, I'm pro-traditional marriage. I believe in the Second Amendment.
Right.
As governor, I balance the budget every year I was in office, put in place a $2 billion rainy day fund, cut taxes 19 times.
Oh, well, what I'll explain to him, though, is what I meant is this general statement about 70% of GOP and independent voters are not yet convinced of who it should be, who can contrast themselves, their solutions that they will propose to get our country back on the right track, contrast that with Obama's failed policies. And a lot of that has to do with what inherently they feel about government. Will they, at this point in the ballgame, know to just instinctively turn right, turn to constitutional conservative principles? And I think the majority of us are not yet convinced that not just he, but that any of the candidates yet are the one who will best be that contrast to Obama.
Is Governor Romney conservative enough?
You know, that's subjective. And
for you?
It is. A lot of this has to do with somebody's past. You know, were they pro-abortion before, and now perhaps they're pro-life? And what allowed that switch, kind of that flip-flop? How have their positions evolved over the years? Were they pro-big government, pro-increase of taxes back then? And where are they now? So it's subjective when you try to measure somebody's conservative quotient. And he's had some articulate explanations, though, as to why he has changed. He has said that as he's grown older, he's become more conservative. That's a good sign.
So what do you make of the idea that the Republican Party seems to be split on this exact topic? And a lot of it comes down to what people deem the establishment candidate versus, I guess, the more conservative candidate. How do you see it?
Well, for one, I see the establishment as anybody who is embracing still the status quo, what's going on there in Washington, where too many folks are thinking that government is a solution instead of many of us believing government is much of the problem. Allow the private sector to grow and to prosper and hire more people by getting government out of the way. Those who don't agree with that, much of the time they're part of the establishment because they're doing just fine. You know, they kind of get their benefits and they get their power and their titles. So those who are a part of that, I think we need to throw those folks out and we need to replace them with more constitutionally conservative, common sense folks who just understand what it's going to take to allow a free market to be, allow it to grow, allow it to thrive.
Good thing we have two segments with you, because I do want to get your take on what seems to be a compromise on the payroll tax holiday, because I can imagine how you feel about it, but I want to speak to the presidential race. Something happened. The race last time around was about the Iraq War. The Iraq War got a little bit better and the economy got worse, so it switched. Do you sense that this race is switching from the economy, even though there's still some dire signs, to culture, to social?
It's not mutually exclusive, fiscal and social issues in this country, and we need to discuss both. Don't forget, though, these national security issues, I believe, are paramount, and they will be in the next few months.
But do you believe the American people are thinking like that? They don't seem to be thinking national security and defense.
Much of it has to do with what the media is portraying and helping to educate the public in terms of what the issues are that need to be concentrated on. I think because about 90% of the mainstream media is in Obama's pocket, they're going to portray and talk about those things that the Obama administration wants to talk about. And they'll skate from talking about some national security issues right now because things are not going well with Obama's naivete when it comes to what it is that we need to do to keep our homeland safe.
And talking about the mainstream media and how they are on the president's side and going forward into the election, over the last couple of weeks, you know, we've been watching this explosion of anger amongst Catholics regarding this contraceptive mandate. And, you know, people on the left have tried to say, look, it's not about contraceptives. It's a war on women. It's not a war on women. Nobody's saying you can't have contraceptives. They're just saying your employer, the church, isn't going to pay for it.
What we're saying is that government has no constitutional right to mandate, one, that we need to violate our conscience. Any faith-based institution or organization or individual must violate their constitution in order to obey the one in the White House.
Why do you think the president wanted this fight? Where was the upside for him? You know, politics as well.
Women votes. No, I think this broke down, don't you, that he thought he would be more popular in the minds of women, many of whom have left him.
Underestimating the wisdom of women then, because women understand there is access to preventative care and to contraception out there, and we don't need government to tell our employers that they must provide that for us. No, he has underestimated the wisdom of the people again, and that is kind of, he set that as precedent the day that he took office, and things, I believe, have only gotten worse in that regard.
Is he going to have to cave on it?
He will cave on that, but of course he'll be able to spin much of it with the media's complicit.
I was still fighting for you, trying to make things fair.
Yeah, but it's not even about contraception, though. Truly it is a war on our religious liberties and that violation of conscience that he would mandate that is un-American because it violates our First Amendment in our Constitution.
Now, you're going to stick around, but I'm just curious. You've been here often, but you go back and forth. Do you know your way around the halls? Like, can you function by yourself, or are you going to have to ask people?
Are you going to ask her for
like how to find a business channel or where Steve's office is?
He's hoping that you're going to find his radio studio because he does a radio show.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, that's what he's hoping for. But anyway, you're going to stick around because we want you to weigh in on this, the president's broken promise to reduce our debt. This is a big story, folks. Governor Palin will weigh in coming up next.
Then, will Mitt Romney become the Hillary Clinton of 2012? The frontrunner who suddenly falls behind.
The president, as you know, unveiling a massive new budget Monday, breaking a promise he made as a candidate to reduce the debt. I think he said he was going to cut it in half. Yesterday, he gave this excuse.
This recession turned out to be a lot deeper than any of us realized. Everybody who was out there back in 2009, if you look back at what their estimates were in terms of how many jobs had been lost, how bad the economy had contracted when I took office, everybody underestimated it. People thought that the economy had contracted 3%. It turns out it contracted close to 9%.
We're back with former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin. I mean, I hate to bring it up, but if the economy was worse than you expected, then wouldn't you be proposing a budget that had more cuts in it?
You would think so. What he does is defy common sense. And also, did you catch what he was saying in there? He is now blaming the estimators, the statisticians, the economists. Everyone else is to blame for the economic woes except for his failed policies. That is another indication of his naivete and his he's not fit to hold this office because we need leadership that will be held accountable, that won't shy away from taking responsibility for mistakes that they have made. And President Obama has made many mistakes in allowing increased taxes, allowing government to grow, accumulating trillions and trillions of dollars more in debt. Though, yes, as you point out, he had promised to cut deficits in half.
Right. Let's talk about something else he promised. I'm watching the end of Jennifer Griffin's report last night, and he said, and by the way, the administration is going to be releasing a proposal that would cut our nuclear arsenal by 80%. Back to the 1950s level, less warheads than China.
This is part of that fundamental transformation of America that he, as a candidate, had promised us.
A nuclear-free country.
And that is this naive notion that everybody would be nuclear-free then, that nobody would have nukes. What concerns me is, as Alaska's governor, we have at Fort Greely the missile defense system up there. In 2009, I had to battle him, and at the time, Secretary Gates asking, why in the world back then had they proposed cutting missile defense systems? Sure. And they backed off a little bit on that, but it was always with the notion that, well, when the political timing was right, he'd come back around and he'd start stripping more of missile defense system. And overall, this 80% reduction idea to make us much less safe.
One of the things that he has said is he really wants Congress to pass this payroll tax cut extension that will conveniently get him through the election. Sounds like there's a tentative deal on Capitol Hill. There are a number of freshman Republicans that say, wait a minute, we don't pay for this anywhere. It will add to the deficit. What do you think?
I I think at this point, the fewer dollars that politicians in Washington, D.C. take from us out of our paychecks, the better. I don't want them taking our money. I don't trust the way that they spend it.
Are you telling Republicans they should vote no then?
I'm telling Republicans allow the tax cuts to continue, the Bush tax cuts. Otherwise, it's poor politics on Republicans' part, because the general public is not going to follow that inside baseball stuff about what the offsets will be, or, well, how will we pay for this?
Yeah.
They're just going to see, as I see, government trying to take more from hardworking Americans, the taxpayer, and spending it frivolously, like on things like doing studies to figure out you need to wash your hands after playing.
But that money ostensibly is going to the Social Security Fund.
Well, it's going to be an idea here again, Gretchen, about the general public not being obsessed with the process of how all of this is to work, budgeting is to work. We're looking at it, kind of taking that 60,000 foot level look at it, saying we are becoming in this nation a party of big government and a party of freedom-loving Americans. This issue isn't a partisan issue, and it's not an inside-type baseball issue that only the pundits and the politicians themselves will understand. We understand with this issue that President Bush had a good idea in cutting the payroll tax, and President Obama at first he didn't want any of those to be extended. So and he had even said, as a candidate and then as president, he said it's poor policy to increase anybody's taxes at a time of a weak economy.
We'll find out what Capitol Hill does.
Well,
Could be prompt.
We'll find out. But the fewer dollars that politicians in Washington, D.C. have of ours, the better.
All right, Governor, stay out of trouble in New York if that's possible.
Thank you so much. You too.
All right, good.
All right. Thank you.